Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Travis B. Hill with his latest comic, Thorn. Travis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, hello. I'm sure plenty of people around the world are watching this, but hello, Australia. My name is Travis B. Hill. I'm a writer of comics and academics. I am, in addition to being a comic book writer, um, I am a theologian. Have a master's in theology. I am almost a full academic historian. I'm finishing up my PhD in history at the University of Texas at Dallas right now, in American religious history and U.S. civil rights history. So that's been a journey. So I write comics, but I also write academically about comics and religion and history and those types of things. And then kind of my day-to-day job is in comics. I am the associate project manager and lead scriptwriter at Sequential Potential Comics, or for the rest of the show, if we talk about it, it'll be SP Comics. But over at SP Comics, we take academic research or nonprofit research and we take those things. Usually we collaborate with scholars and academics and like I said, nonprofit researchers to turn their work into comic stories. So
Wow,
yeah, it's fun.
that's amazing. That's really, really good. So, how did you get into comics? Oh, sorry. Before that, I actually reminded me of something. So, I back in the day, this was like I think almost 10 years ago. I used to be involved with a group of volunteering. Like it was a volunteering effort, and there's this global organization which is based in Netherlands, and they have this. It's based on comics because they want people to tell comics in their own language, and it's all around like social impact. So they want to raise social issues via comics. So they go to like really small towns and villages and they talk about like social issues in those like small towns, especially in like in countries like India and Nigeria and a lot of these places, and they encourage, they teach people, they do workshops with like local youth, teach them how to make comics, and then these people actually go and like spread awareness about like their social issues via comics, which is really good.
That's it. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to be involved in the comic creating world. There's a lot of different avenues, things like what you just mentioned, what we're doing with SP Comics, things that are outside of Marvel, DC, direct market, indie, manga, those types of things. And part of it is that consumption of sequential art to get across, to communicate ideas or social issues or those things, is easier to consume and to communicate with sequential art. And making comics is a little less, it's not as time consuming as like a video, right? And you don't need as much technology to get it to play, those types of things. So it's a good, like, you can hand out a one page flyer, right? That can
Yeah,
be a comic in 7 panels or whatever.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and then just to your point, one thing that in the American Civil Rights Movement, um, they used comics as well as to kind of communicate uh, their messaging, what they're trying to achieve. The Montgomery bus boycott, getting news out about those things, and other various types of activism in the civil rights movement was communicated. They printed comics. They took the messaging to comics. They handed it out to the people who were going to be marching and participating in their protests. So comics has a long history of communicating ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, like a lot of people say that comics should get rid of politics, but I don't know. For whatever time I remember, comics have been political. They have been about messaging, of
Sure.
some sort. So yeah.
Well, and at the end of the day, people are political beings. They're not, and I don't mean like the way we have rigidly defined politics now between, it's often a duality or a binary between a conservative or a liberal mindset. That's not how politics has always been, and that's not how politics proper is understood. But everybody has a political viewpoint about how things should operate, how things should be governed, how people should operate in a society in a way that is ethical and moral and good or right and just. And so whenever anybody writes a story, those things are going, their thoughts about those things are going to be present, whether it's explicit or implicit, So when people say, oh, I don't want politics about comics, they just don't understand. They're saying something, but nothing is pure escapism. That's not what it is. Like nothing is. Like you can watch Star Wars. Star Wars is not pure escapism. It's a dictatorship, this evil empire versus rebel forces trying to survive and overthrow an evil dictatorship. Like it's politics all over that. But people are like, oh, let's get back to the time where it's just about space operas. Well, then you're not really watching what's going on.
But that's the good thing about something that's built really well, like Star Wars is scripted in a way that you can actually enjoy it as pure escapism and also enjoy it as a great political commentary, right? So
well, and that's what I think is that because I think anybody that consumes Star Wars never consumes it as escapism. I think what they do is it's such a, like you said, it's such a good story that you buy into a side of the political spectrum. We all root for Luke and Han and Leia.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We're rooting against the evil empire, and we know that.
Yeah.
And so it helps us form, who we are and the way we think about the world in a political way. And so the thing is, if it's good writing and the politics is subtext, in a way that gets you to root for a particular character. And again, that's probably the good thing. I bring up Star Wars because it's just so obvious that it is political, but it is also something that so many people enjoy, right? And it is something now that people say, oh, well, don't put politics in my Star Wars. And you're just like, oh gosh, shut up. Shut up. Like you don't understand it. But the thing is, so I bring that up as an example, but it's helpful that also Star Wars is removed from Earth. And so when you start to think about the political commentary of Star Wars, it's removed from the immediate context we're in. It's doing something, and so the subtext is even more kind of embedded. Even if you have a very explicit evil empire, that's super political, but it's in space. It's not, authoritarianism and right in our face. Like that's not what it is. Which is different because, like, Thorn, as you can see from these first two covers, is a you can tell, like, you could look at that and be like, okay, this is going to have some sort of socio-political ideology in the book. Like you got this main character. I mean, I know the covers are up, so I'm talking about them, but you just look at those first two covers and you've got a main character, with the liberation fist as part of his emblem, smashing a cop car and then being surrounded by police officers. So, there's something going on, and so that is more grounded in a current climate and a current socio-political context, where then people can be like, oh, it's a political book where Star Wars is not. But you're like, no, they're both political, but one is more grounded in our current reality, and one is, happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So
absolutely, you nailed it. So coming back to the question, how did you actually get into comics, and how did you get into writing? Because I understand you went through a phase of basketball as well, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So, I grew up reading comics. I loved it. I was a Batman reader more so than anything else. All through elementary school, middle school, it was Batman, 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 Batman. I would hunt for back issues. I was obsessed with the Nightfall storyline, Night's End,
Mm,
Night Quest, and I actually kind of read it a little out of order. I got this graphic novel of Night's End when I was in like fourth or fifth grade. I read it, and then somehow I found out that there were more. There, like that was. I found out that that was the end. You know, Batman fighting Jean Paul Valley to get the
yeah,
mantle back, right? And so I was like, "Oh, this is a great story." And someone was like, "Well, yeah, but there's a lot that happened before this."
yeah, yeah.
And so then I start. There's this used bookstore in the United States that kind of started in Texas. So there's a ton of them around Texas called Half Price Books, where you can go sell your books back, and then all the books there are sold for half the original cover price. So they have a huge like back issue section of comics, and what I would do is go up all the time and just hunt these, you know, Nightfall and Night Quest back issues. Finally got them all, but it took me like through college to get them all. But I've read it all now. And in that time, I started to read a bunch of other Batman storylines, like No Man's Land and Cataclysm, and so that was my thing. The Batman was, and finally got caught up, you know.
Mm,
And then through college, I started to read some more DC, Superman, Green Arrow, that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Um, then, I read a little bit of Spider-Man, but I wasn't a big Marvel person. I was in that purism age of like, my heroes don't kill, they're good, they are, you know, objectively good,
yep,
and bad guys are objectively bad, and there's this like godly moral standard that you should uphold and characters should uphold.
yeah,
And so when I looked over at Marvel and I'm like, oh, Civil War, why are they all fighting each other? Like, where are all the bad guys? Why is Captain America a bad guy? Like, oh, they don't have it figured out. All their good guys are bad guys. And so, you know,
yeah,
I'm like in middle school and I'm like, oh, I don't want to read that.
yeah.
And then I become an adult and realize the world's a little complex. And so I started reading Marvel a lot. I remember I was a school teacher for a little while, and after I play, so you referenced me playing basketball. I played basketball in college. I'll be 37 in 4 days, so I'm
Oh,
getting
wow.
old. But I played basketball in college. I played a year professionally after college in the United States in a league called the ABA, American
Right.
Basketball Association. So that was fun. I actually had a friend who played, I believe it's the SBL in
Okay.
Australia, the State Basketball League.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he played. He's like one of my closest friends, EJ Kushner. He played for the Kilsyth Cobras.
Oh, nice.
I used to have a pair of Kilsyth Cobras basketball shorts. So that's my Australia connection. He was down there, played for
Nice.
a couple seasons. So
Yeah,
I really wanted to play in Australia. I had a lot of not a oh yeah, like half the team. So the Australia, you know, y'all's basketball season is over the summer.
yes, yeah.
And I'm about
And
to
it's
lose
all in
all your
December.
comic listeners. They're about to just be like, all right, this is a basketball podcast. I'm done. But and so the over our summer is, you know, July or I'm
Yeah,
not May through September
May
or
through
whatever.
July. Yeah,
So then the basketball season in the upper hemispheres is October through May.
mhm,
So a
yeah.
lot of the guys on my basketball team got contracts to go on that professional team I played it here in the States. About 6 or 7 of them got contracts to come play down in Australia during those
Nice.
summer months, and I didn't. Nobody wanted me. Nobody in Australia wanted me. None of the teams. But yeah, so they played. I didn't. But then a short time after that, as I was getting ready for my second season, my hip broke. I had a tumor. I didn't know it was there. I have a
Oh,
whole hip replacement now. So it was kind of tough. It was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing for a long time, play basketball for several years. That's going to be my job. And after 1 year, it was no longer an option. So I had to figure out what was next. I immediately started coaching high school basketball once I was back on my feet. Got a job teaching math because, in the United States, if you're a math teacher, you can get a job at any school you want. So I just
wow.
made sure that, you know, any school, I wanted to be a really good basketball coach. And so any school that wanted me, I wanted to be able to get the job. And so if you had a math teaching credential, you could get a job at any school you wanted. So that worked out, had a lot of fun. Um, we were good. I had fun. But after about 4 years, I was like, I can't teach math anymore. I can't do this. So I got the opportunity to come to Dallas and to go to theology school at Dallas Seminary and work in doing Christian nonprofit work. So I did that. I'm originally from Dallas. I went to school
Mm,
in Shreveport, played basketball in Ohio, came back to Shreveport to teach, and then came back to Dallas, where I'm
wow.
from, to go to school and to work in the nonprofit sector. So, but while I was at theology school, I kind of started reflecting on the last 2 years I lived in Shreveport as a teacher. There was this homeless kid, my roommate and I, a good friend of mine, JP Sloan, my closest friend. We were living in this neighborhood together in this house that our church owned. Anyways, and we were working with high school kids in the neighborhood, and we'd been doing that for a while. We did it as undergrads when we were in college, yada yada yada. And this one high school kid, came knocking on our door one night and was like, "Hey, I don't have anywhere to live." Like, his dad put him out. Dad said, "You can't come back." So he lived with us until he
Wow.
graduated high school. And so, if you want to go, anybody who's listening, you can go to my website. It's travisbhillcomics.com. And there is a free chapter 1 mustard seed. So what happened was, I was reflecting on this time of my life, this 2 years of like kind of what happened to me. I was thinking about it, how do I think about what happened from a sociological level? Like, I was starting to get all my thoughts of theology, philosophy, sociology, and I was infusing them into this time, this kind of very interesting time in my life where this kid, now a young man who is a friend of mine, Johnny, came to live with us. And I thought, this could be a story. This could enough happened to us that this could be a story, and I can infuse it with all these thoughts that I have,
Mm,
kind of at a higher, plane of thinking, whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I was like, man, I I think it could work as a comic story. That's what I thought.
Hmm.
So the theology school had an arts department, and I had taken a couple classes. What was it? There was a film in theology, a music in theology. So, how do you think about the themes of film narratives and music composition from a theological standpoint? And I had enjoyed those.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I went to one of my professors and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'm going to." This was in 2016 in the spring. And I
Hmm.
said, and I signed up. I said, I want to write a comic, but I don't know any of the basics of writing comics. I know how to write because I have to write all these academic papers. Um,
Hmm.
so I signed up for a intro to comic writing course in New York City, um, with an editor at the time. It was the associate editor or assistant editor of Spider-Man.
Wow.
Tom Brennan was teaching this, like, it was like a weekend course, but just to get the basics. I'm sure it's what all these Marvel editors do on the weekend to make a bunch of extra money off
Yep.
wannabe comic book writers like me, right? You know, I mean, it was $150. I took my now wife, then girlfriend, up there for the weekend. We got to hang out in New York. I got to sit in Tom's class. Now Tom and I know each other, so it's cool. He's not in comics anymore, so he went from being the assistant editor of Spider-Man to not doing comics.
Wow.
So that's just kind of the world of it, right? But that weekend class gave me the basics of how to just write a script and some options, because there is no like set way to write a comic script. So just gave me some options, gave me a lot of good tips of ways to get started. So I had that. I came back to Dallas ready to go for the fall semester, and I signed up. I told my professor, I said, okay, I've taken this class, took the class, and I said, I'm signing up for your collaborative art and theology course so that I can. So the class was about how to take your kind of theological thoughts and infuse them into the art you create, right? So just like we talked about political subtext, like if you're creating art with a theological subtext, like how do you do that, right? And if you have this art piece in mind, which I did, then, and you have this theological thought process of the art piece that you want to contextualize, the class was to kind of flesh those out, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, I'm going to take this class. And my professor was like, hey, you need to link up with this comic book artist who's also doing the same degree program you are, who's here on campus. I said, oh, okay, cool. And so he was like, he gave me Mark Pate, who's the artist of Thorn, and now one of a close friend of mine. So I got Mark's email. I emailed him and said, hey, man, Dr. Baslin told me to connect with you because I'm thinking about writing a comic book story. And he said, you're a comic book artist. Let's meet up. So we went and got coffee in July 2016. And we met up at this coffee shop kind of close to campus. And we were talking, yada. So then, Mark's like, okay, yeah, it's a decent idea. And Mark will tell you, like, he had talked to a lot of kids students during his time at seminary that tried to pitch him these like crappy Christian comic ideas, just like how to take the Bible and turn it into a comic book and just, stuff that he's not interested in.
Yep.
And I wasn't giving him that. So he was like, hey, you might have something. He was still a little weary of it, but he was like, you might have something. So he's like, let's meet up. Let's talk again. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, just email me, yada, yada. So we leave, and I pull up outside of my apartment, and I get out of my car, and I look across the street, and Mark is getting out of his car. And I was like, wait, do you live in these apartments? He was like, yeah. Do you live in those apartments? I was like, yeah. And so we found out we lived across the street. And so we decided that on Monday afternoons, neither one of us had anything Monday afternoons, we would meet up at my apartment. He was working on his own comic story at the time, and I would work on what would eventually become Mustard Seed. And so we started doing that, just hanging out, talking about what we're working on, just kind of committing to each other to work on something, right? Like that's a big part of creating comics, is just doing the thing, like writing it, doing it, whatever.
Absolutely.
And so to have somebody to kind of be committed to be on that journey with, that's a fun thing about comics too,
Oh yeah.
So as I was starting to like develop the themes and get the ideas down, Mark started to suggest other classes that he had already taken that were helpful to him for his story process, like plot and character development was a course he suggested, and then one of the creative writing courses and all that. By the time I took all these courses, I had chapter 1 edited, finished, ready to go. I was like, I knew where it was going. And so Mark was like, you know what? This is a good story. I believe in it. I will draw the first chapter for you, color it, letter it, so that you can pitch it. And so I said, yes, let's do that. So now you can go read that whole first chapter. And again, it's semi-autobiographical. Um, and so it's called Mustard Seed. It's on my website. And now
Do check it out.
yeah, definitely check it out. I've written all 12 chapters. I've scripted them out. The book has an agent. We're trying to get it picked up. We'll see. That'll be great. That would be great. But yeah, exactly. Who knows?
Yeah.
But hopefully that will happen and we'll get to finish it. But it's 300 pages, so it's a large book. Probably gonna have to cut it down to like 250. But again, for Mark to dedicate that much time, he would need to be paid in advance. And now Mark is an artist in New York. He's in the Artists Union for Film and TV. So his day job is working as an art director on a TV show. He was the assistant art director for a TV show. I can't remember the name of it because I'm a bad friend. But now now there's a writer's strike. So now he's just working on Thor. So for right now. But
talking about it, can
so
you
that's
give
kind
us
of how I got started,
and
I just been creating stories since then and getting more and more into the world of comics and what I'm writing and just different stuff that comes to me. I originally said, because I'm finishing up a PhD, and so one of my mentors in comics after that, I did a year-long apprenticeship to graduate from theology school with Robert Wilson, who is a comic book artist who was in Dallas. Now he's in Oklahoma City, but now he's a good friend of mine as well. But at the time, he committed in 2018, 2019 for a full calendar year. He agreed to mentor me as part of my theology program because I had done so much stuff in the arts department. I ended up getting like an emphasis in the arts. And that was the last thing I had to do. So he mentored me the whole way. But one thing Robert asked me was like, because he was a great mentor. I mean, the way he understands the business of comics, not just the creation of comics and how to think about getting into the industry, because there's no cut way to get into comics industry. And the advice most people are going to tell you is make comics. Like, okay, cool. But like, great. And that's fine because that's something you need to do. But what then? What then do you do?
Yeah.
And Robert is fantastic about, make comics, but make them with a purpose and strategically. And so he gave me a ton of like, if you want to get into the industry, there's no one way to do it, but here's a way that will be probably more helpful than you just making comics and not knowing what to do with them. So he gave me a lot of really good advice. And then on the business side, thinking about like, hey, writers go broke trying to do this. Like, don't do that. And I was like, I can't. So, but he asked me, he was like, what is your goal with comics? And I said, well, I want to do academics. I'm going to do a PhD. I want to be like, so I want to write like these research books and research papers. So my goal would be to have enough comic credits that are good, that when I have another comic idea, any of the big indie publishers will say, oh, well, this is that professor at such and such who writes the good comics. Like we'll pay for your book. Yeah. And Robert was like, well, good luck. Like, that's hard. Like, that would be very hard. He's like, that would be great, but that'd be very hard. And basically my thing was like, I don't think I'll have that many comic story ideas like writers. At the time, I was so in awe of Jeff Lemire, right? Because Jeff Lemire at the time, and probably still to this day, had 6 or 7 books, different series in shops every month. Wow. Like he would be working, he would have 7, his 3 DC stories, his 2 Marvel stories, and then 2 independent stories. And it's like, how are you writing 7 stories at one time, man? Like, no way. That was my thought. My thought was like, I'm not going to be a comic book writer because I know to be a comic book writer as a profession, you have to do that, I thought. And so my thought was, I just want to have good stories every once in a while. And so I want to do something else for my job. And then I will be the guy who, there's that professor of history at UT Dallas. whenever he has a comic idea, it's a hit.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like that's super
yeah.
arrogant because that's not how it works.
Mhm.
But I say all that was in 2018, and here we are
Mhm.
5 years later, and I worked on 9 different stories last week. Right? So
Wow, that's
that's my
amazing.
job now. My job is comics, right? I've got 3 stories that I'm working on that I just finished. This is the first time in a long time that I haven't had a sequential potential script that I have to
Wow,
work on. I just put 3 of them, finalized 3 of them last week. So there's that. I've got Thorn. I've got Mustard Seed. I'm still plucking away at making some edits too. I've got Techno Nights, and then I have, I pitched another anthology last week, and then there's 2 other anthologies that I'm working on. So there's this, 9 things
wow.
going on all at one time, and I'm like, oh, now I see how Jeff Lemire does it. Like I get it. It took me a while to get it, and
Yeah,
it's as exhausting as I thought it was, but I get it now.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. Cool. So, let's talk about Thorn,
sure,
because we're coming close to time. Actually,
yeah, yeah,
I have a hard stop in a few minutes, but let's talk about Thorn. The story is amazing. I feel like it's very relevant to current times. It is also, I feel it's very nicely paced. Actually, I just bashed the whole thing in like 15 minutes. Both dishes, 0 and 1. So it's really, I feel that it's a very well constructed book. It's very beautifully drawn. I, I think you have a winner on your hands. Do you want to get into like what about the characters and about the
yeah.
story a
Sure. I
little
didn't know
bit?
if you had like a pointed question that you were thinking about when reading the book. If you do, interrupt me. Let me know. But yeah. So one, it is beautifully drawn. Mark is great. Everything you see with your eyes is Mark. He does the letters, the colors, and the line art. So I'm just giving him a script and then saying, make some magic for us. But he's great. I'm enjoying the pacing. I think our team, our creative team, our editor Razul, script consultant Sheldon Allen, Razul Berry is the editor, and then Mark Pate. He's a storyteller himself. He has his own comics that he's written as well. So um, he gets it when it comes to that. And then of course Tony Cottrell, our editor, our publisher over at Advent, who writes his own stories. Like everybody involved, like Sheldon. Sheldon is a fantastic comic book writer who has a bunch of series with Scout that you should definitely check out. And then
Mm,
Razul Berry is a documentary filmmaker, and his film right now, Juneteenth, Faith and Freedom, is just it's won so many film festival awards. It's just awesome. So everybody on this creative team is a storyteller, and that is good. They all have their own stories they're working on, but they're also all bringing very unique um, perspectives to Thorn, and we're all in agreement on kind of how it should be moving and operating, and the story should be going and plotted, and so then I rough out the scenes and then get feedback and then edit them, and that's been good, and then I you know kind of clunk out the dialogue and edit it down and hand it over, and then they edit it down some more, and we get it right where it is. So it's been really fun. And Mark, we were just talking today because Mark just finished yesterday the pencils, inks, and letters, not the colors yet, but pencils, inks, and letters on issue 6. So we're moving. We've got almost 6 full issues completed and ready to go now. It's a 12 issue story. But Mark, we were texting today, and we were just on the phone right before this meeting, and he was like, "Man, this is issue 6. Is the whole story has been well paced. Like I appreciate that compliment, but he said issue 6 is it. Like that's like you're getting better with each issue." And I was like, "Well, thanks. This is something that I hope as our team continues to develop the story that we're just getting better and better with each issue, because, you know, you want readers to stick around, and
Yep.
and so what you owe the reader, I think you owe the reader something consistently good, it's consistently great, and if you can do better each issue, which is the hope, then do it. So Thorn itself is this. What I tell people is it's Batman, but Commissioner Gordon is the main villain, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever you think about that, that's what it is. But not just a one bad cop. It's the whole system is bad and corrupt, and in ways that, and Thorn is trying to protect his system. I mean, his neighborhood, from an unjust justice system, right?
Yep.
From
Yep.
the police department to the way that the police operate in his neighborhood, to
Yep.
judges who take cases,
Absolutely.
to city planning, and how that can be harmful to the neighborhood. So not just Thorn, but Alton Eldridge, his alter ego, and I'm not giving anything away because you can read the Zero issue and find out that that's who that is.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
as you now, no one's read. I mean, only a handful of people have read issue 1, and you're one of them. But as you know, like, even Alton Eldridge, when he's not in uniform as Thorn, he is still trying to figure out in his civilian life, how do you, in his secret identity or whatever, how do I protect? How can I protect my neighborhood as Alton? How can I protect my neighborhood as Thorn? And that's what the book's about. The book is about what type of hero or vigilante arises when the whole system is structured against, you know, your neighborhood and people that you care about. So
yeah. No, I think there's very obvious parallels to Batman with Thorn.
I
There's
say
like,
this. Sorry to interrupt you. I say this. Anybody out there who is a Batman fan, read Thorn issue 0. You can go. Thorn issue 0 is free on my website, travisbhillcomics.com. Go read Thorn issue 0, and then go read Batman, Detective Comics number 27
cool.
from 1940. The original appearance of Batman. Go read Detective Comics 27. It's only a 6-page Batman story. And you'll see Thorn issue 0 is a homage to that story narrative. I took kind of that general outline, and you'll see it's the same, but I infused it with how is this character different from, like, what is Thorn trying to say that Batman maybe can't, and those types of things. So yeah.
No, absolutely. It takes the same structure as Batman, about a common citizen rising up against a corrupt system to fill that gap that obviously police can't. And in this case, it's actually against the police, right?
Sure.
And then you have your own twist on it. So that's amazing. Like that's how new pop culture comes. It is derivative, but it builds upon something that's already there. But
I
it has
think
its own identity.
yeah, I mean, there's a million vigilante comic book characters, right? And so there's a trope there. So it's not, Batman is the most common and well known, but there's a genre and tropes at play in vigilante comics. And so what Thorn tries to do is tries to lean into them, because it's still superhero comic. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But it tries to subvert them and take those normal tropes and spin them on their head, and to take a different type of look. So, there is a derivativeness to it, but what I would say is there's a subversion to it more so than anything else, that it takes those tropes of the genre and subverts them to something new. And that's what I think good storytelling
That's the
should
beauty
be.
of
Like,
it.
we shouldn't be telling the same Batman stories over and over again. We should, take the characters and the tropes and the ideas, and then, make them
Make something
contextualized to
new.
what we want to say
Exactly.
now or whatever.
Exactly. Good stuff, Travis. All the best for Thorn. We're coming to time. We're just closing in now, but
July 5th, it'll be available. Check it out.
pre-order from Previous World today and get your copy of Thorn.
There you go. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll hope we speak again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and we'll figure out something for issue 2, hopefully.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.